The amaranth spire did not look like a building so much as a judgment made physical. It hung above Vera Prime like a jeweled thorn, arches of silver-black alloy, luminous ribs, and a halo ring that turned with slow, deliberate grace. From the shuttle window, Commander Lyra Vance watched its rotation and counted the weapon ports she was allowed to see. The ones she wasn't allowed to see were the ones that mattered. Inside the cabin, Ambassador Koji Haro sat with his hands folded, posture relaxed in the way diplomats learned when they needed their pulse to stay private. His hair had more gray than the official photos, and his eyes carried the practiced calm of a man who had talked down riots and boardrooms and, once, a mutiny. "First time in their court?" he asked. "First time in a room designed to make breathing feel like permission," Lyra said. She rolled her shoulders once, subtle, testing the artificial gravity. "Feels tuned." Haro followed her gaze to the floor plates. "It's a ritual. It's a tactic." Lyra's voice stayed even. "Rituals are for people who don't need to win." A soft chime sounded. The shuttle's onboard translator lit up in the corner of her lens display. "Welcome, emergent envoys. Please remain still for compliance verification." The words arrived a fraction late, like the machine wanted her to hear them after she'd already obeyed. A skin swept the cabin, lightless and cold. Tiny prickles rose on Lyra's skin as if the air itself had examined her. A second later, a metallic voice spoke in Concord standard through the ship's speakers. "Human Envoy. Commander Lyra Vance. Designation confirmed. Weapons, none detected. Emotional variance, elevated." Haro's mouth twitched. "That last part wasn't necessary. They meant it to be," Lyra replied. Docking clamps locked. The shuttle's hatch opened on a corridor of polished stone and transparent alloy, where gravity pulled just slightly sideways, enough to make ankles protest and balance feel earned. A row of Concord guards stood at intervals, their armor sculpted more than practical, crested helms turned forward like statues judging a parade. Lyra stepped onto the spire and let herself wobble once, just enough to read their reaction. Two guards tightened their grips on their ceremonial rifles. Not fear. Not readiness. Enjoyment. Haro adjusted his pace to match the corridor's tilt without looking down. "Remember. They're broadcasting." "I'm aware," Lyra said. "So are they." The corridor opened into a waiting chamber with a ceiling so high the lights disappeared into haze. Delegates clustered in floating terraces, their species diversity rendered into a single texture, attention. Some stared openly. Others pretended not to. A handful leaned toward their companions, whispering, eyes flicking toward the humans with the curious hunger reserved for animals in glass enclosures. Then the doors to the council chamber parted. The room beyond was a lesson in scale. The central dais rose like a cliff, and the seats of the High Council were carved into it, each chair elevated by inches and symbolism. Above them, the Concord emblem, a spiral of interlocking stars, glowed with a light that made the air shimmer. The floor where Lyra and Haro were directed to stand was lower, darker, and fractionally steeper, forcing an unconscious forward lean. Kneeling disguised as architecture. A voice rolled down from the dais, translated a beat late. "Earth." High Arbiter SYT Charcoal did not stand. He did not need to. His species was tall and narrow, plated in pale chitin that caught the chamber light like bone. His eyes were black and unblinking, his hands resting on the arms of his seat as if the universe had installed him there. "You arrive under accusation," he continued, every syllable shaped for a courtroom. "Under observation. Under restraint." Haro stepped forward half a pace. "We arrive under summons, Arbiter. As requested." SYT Charcoal's gaze drifted to Lyra as if she were an object attached to the ambassador. "You arrive after sabotaging Corridor 17. You arrive after weaponizing civilian commerce and disrupting the Concord's stabilizing flow." A murmur slid through the terraces. Lyra kept her face still while her mind reached for the facts. Corridor 17's traffic records. The supposed explosion. The missing buoy telemetry. The way the Council had announced human guilt before Earth's reply reached them. SYT Charcoal lifted a thin, luminous document. The submission articles. The title alone drew a soft, anticipatory sound from the chamber, like the audience had seen this play before and enjoyed the ending. These articles will restore peace, SYT Charcoal said. Earth will accept Concord monitors in all military networks. Earth will restrict shipbuilding tonnage to defensive class. Earth will provide resource contributions suitable to its capacity. Earth will accept advisory teams to ensure cultural stabilization. Harrow's jaw tightened briefly, then smoothed. Those conditions are extensive. They are standard, SYT Charcoal replied. For species that must be guided. Lyra felt the word must like a hand at her throat. She wanted to speak. She didn't. Not yet. She let Harrow carry the formalities while she watched the room. One delegate in the upper terraces, small, layered like folded cloth, tilted their head with something like sympathy. Another, heavy-bodied and jeweled, smiled the way predators did when prey approached water. SYT Charcoal's voice sharpened. Earth has 72 hours to sign. Non-compliance will be met with sanctions and corridor restriction. Continued defiance will invite enforcement actions. He let the final phrase hang with curated vagueness. Everyone in the room knew what enforcement meant. Blockade. Raids. Stabilization. A word that tasted clean and ended bloody. Harrow bowed, measured. We will review. You will submit. SYT Charcoal corrected, and the chamber laughed softly, politely, as if humor were also law. The session ended with a bell tone that sounded like a door closing. They were ushered to a smaller chamber, glass walls looking out on Vera Prime's ocean bands. A table waited with the submission articles projected above it, clause after clause arranged like neat rows of chains. A council legal aide, smooth-skinned, hairless, pale, gestured. These terms protect you. Harrow scanned quickly, lips moving minutely. Lyra did not need to read every line to see the trap. Monitors embedded in networks. Limits on shipyards. A resource contribution schedule. The phrase cultural stabilization advisors repeated like a refrain. This isn't protection, she said, finally letting her voice into the room. This is ownership with better manners. The aide's smile didn't falter. Your language is emotional. My language is accurate. Harrow raised a calming hand. Commander. Lyra exhaled through her nose and softened her posture without softening her eyes. Ambassador, if we sign this, we can't resist later without becoming criminals under their framework. It's not a treaty. It's a lock. Before Harrow could answer, Lyra's wrist display pulsed, an encrypted ping from Dr. Samira Quresh aboard the Resolute. She opened it with a flick of her thumb. Samira, data chain on Corridor 17 is wrong. Beacon timing doesn't match propagation. Someone forged custody logs. Encryption signature isn't civilian. It's Concord grade. Lyra's heartbeat stayed steady by habit, but the room seemed to tilt a fraction more. Harrow noticed her expression. What is it? She slid the message across privately. He read it once, then again, slower. The next session began before the spire's artificial dawn finished dimming. Lyra and Harrow were escorted through a different corridor, wider, brighter, more public. Cameras floated like patient insects, their lenses tracking micro-expressions. The Concord didn't just want submission, it wanted the galaxy to watch it happen. The council chamber had been rearranged for theater. A circular platform hovered over the dark floor, and the human delegation was placed at its center like a specimen on display. Above them, tiered terraces held delegates of 100 species. The Concord emblem burned overhead, bright enough to tint shadows into lines of obedience. High Arbiter SYT Charcoal addressed the room without greeting. Proceedings resume under emergency security revision, the translator said, a heartbeat late. Due to escalating instability. Harrow leaned slightly toward Lyra. They're shortening the rope. Lyra kept her chin level. Then we make them trip over it. SYT Charcoal's gaze swept the chamber. Earth's representative will answer for Corridor 17. Evidence has been reviewed. Guilt is statistically consistent. A ripple of approving murmurs traveled through the terraces, the sound of minds accepting a pre-written conclusion. Harrow stepped forward. Arbiter, the Concorde has received no full response from Earth. Communications have been delayed by your routing restrictions. Charcoal's head tilted by a fraction, as if considering whether to dignify the statement. Your species has been granted due access within emergent allowances. Emergent allowances, Harrow repeated softly, and Lyra heard the steel behind his calm. Meaning the rights you feel like permitting. That drew a few startled clicks from minor delegates. Charcoal didn't blink. Submission articles will be signed within 24 hours, he declared. Or enforcement begins. A pulse of heat moved through Lyra's ribs, anger, yes, but contained. She waited until the chamber settled into smug quiet, then spoke in a clear voice meant to carry. Arbiter. The translator lagged. Her single word hung in the air in human language first, then arrived in Concord Standard with an almost annoyed delay. Charcoal's eyes landed on her like weights. The military attendant may speak if granted. I request the right to submit exculpatory evidence, Lyra said. Under Concord law. The room stilled. Not because they respected her request, but because a human had used the phrase Concord law like it belonged in her mouth. Charcoal's tone cooled further. Evidence has been reviewed. Then you won't fear it being reviewed again, Lyra replied. If your process is clean. A few delegates shifted, the way a crowd moved when they sensed a crack in the stage. Charcoal leaned forward slightly. You presume equality. No, Lyra said. I presume procedure. The translator echoed, late. The delay, for once, helped. It forced the room to sit with the line in human language first, raw, unpolished, impossible to soften. One of the senior legal scribes, a tall figure draped in shimmering fabric, raised a hand. The accused species may petition under Precedent 12.7, subsection Emergent Classification. Charcoal's jawline tightened. A human had brought his own archive against him. Precedent 12.7 applies only when the evidence chain is contested, Charcoal said. It is contested, Lyra replied. Formally. Now. A pause. The air felt pressurized, as if the spire itself held its breath. Very well, Charcoal said at last, each word polished into a weapon. Your submission will be accepted if verified by a council auditor. Your auditor will be appointed by the enforcement block. Harrow's eyes flicked to Lyra. A trap with a ribbon. She gave him a barely there nod, understood. The auditor arrived within minutes, escorted with ceremony that tried to masquerade as neutrality. The being was slender, smooth-faced, and impossibly composed, wearing the pale sash of council integrity like a costume borrowed from a museum. I am Auditor Relson, he said. Your time is limited. I advise cooperation. He guided them to a side chamber lined with translucent panels. Beyond them, the ocean world gleamed, tranquil enough to feel insulting. Relson activated a privacy field. Off record, he said. Lyra didn't relax. She'd learned that off record often meant unsafe. Relson clasped his hands. The High Arbiter wishes this concluded. If Earth signs quietly, the Concord can be gracious. Reduced tribute. Fewer monitors. A dignified transition. Harrow's voice stayed measured. You admit the charges are negotiable. Relson's expression didn't change. I admit outcomes are shaped. As all outcomes are. Lyra tilted her head. And if we refuse? Relson's gaze flicked to the chamber window, where far-off lights marked docked warships. Then the galaxy learns that defiance has consequences. Earth becomes a lesson. Harrow inhaled, slow. We're not a lesson. We're a member species. Relson let out a quiet, almost sympathetic sound. You are a category. Lyra stepped closer, closing the space without making it aggressive. If you want to help, validate our evidence. Relson's eyes narrowed slightly. There is no validation that will be accepted unless the enforcement block permits it. Then you're not an auditor, Lyra said. You're a messenger. A flicker, annoyance, or embarrassment passed across his features and was gone. He looked at Harrow instead. Ambassador, I can make your fall softer. Harrow's smile was tired but genuine. We didn't come here to fall. Relsone's gaze returned to Lyra, colder now. You are bold for a short-lived being. Lyra lifted her wrist and tapped a control. In her sleeve, unseen, Quresha's recorder hummed. You talk too freely for someone who believes in integrity. Relsone's eyes widened by a fraction. Then he straightened. This conversation did not occur. It did, Lyra said. And it will matter. They left the chamber with Relsone's escort, returning to the public corridors where cameras waited. On the way, Lyra's calm pulsed, Quresh again. Samira, I trace more. Enforcement ships were within micro-jump range of Corridor 17 during the sabotage. Beacon log custody jumps between 3 Concord nodes. That's impossible unless someone edited records from inside. Lyra's reply was brief. Keep digging. Need clean chain. In the main chamber, the hearing resumed. SYT Charkal's voice filled the space with practiced certainty. Earth's representatives may speak. 3 minutes. Harrow began, choosing words that would hold under scrutiny. He spoke of commerce, of shared corridors, of peaceful intent. The room listened with polite impatience, as if waiting for the important part, the surrender. Lyra watched the terraces instead. She found the folded cloth delegate again, Threnvas, according to her briefing, watching not with hunger but with unease. When Harrow's time ended, SYT Charkal's gaze shifted to Lyra. Commander Vance may present her petition. 2 minutes. Lyra stepped forward. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The evidence provided for Corridor 17 contains contradictions, she said. Beacon propagation times do not match recorded timestamps. Custody logs show transfers that cannot occur across restricted nodes without enforcement authorization. Either the Concord systems are broken. A few delegates stiffened at the implied insult. Or the record has been altered. SYT Charkal's tone sharpened. You suggest the Council falsifies evidence? The chamber did not explode into panic. It fractured into it. Voices overlapped in a dozen frequencies as sensor data streamed across the amphitheater walls. Trajectory arcs glowed white. Mass estimates pulsed red. Every incoming signature carried the same impossible note, precision. Not the wild scatter of raiders or the blunt presence of conquerors. Something cleaner. Deliberate. SYT Charkal rose fully now, chitin plates catching the light. Unregistered vessels violate Concord approach doctrine, he announced. This confirms hostile intent. Lyra didn't look at him. She watched the numbers. Vector alignment. Power modulation curves. No thermal spikes. Not an attack posture. A Concord tactician spoke too quickly. They're not forming an assault wedge. Then they are hiding it. SYT Charkal snapped. The main display resolved into silhouettes as the first ships breached sensor range. They were wrong in ways that unsettled the room, angular without being aggressive, layered rather than armored, surfaces dull and functional. No ornament. No intimidation crests. Just purpose. A hush spread. The kind that came when certainty failed. There, quiet, someone whispered. Lyra's comm vibrated once. Becky, on schedule. Holding discipline. Lyra exhaled through her nose. Good, she murmured. SYT Charkal turned toward her, eyes bright. You coordinated this provocation. I coordinated restraint, Lyra replied. You're confusing the two. The lead human vessel slid into a holding pattern at the edge of Concord-controlled space. Then another. Then dozens more, assembling with clockwork patience. No weapons powered. No threats broadcast. Just presence. A Concord officer leaned toward SYT Charkal. High Arbiter, they've stopped. SYT Charkal's mandibles flexed. They expect applause. A new channel opened without request. The human fleet's signal cut through the chamber's systems cleanly, its handshake precise enough to sting. The image that formed above the dais was simple, a woman in a dark uniform, silver hair pulled back, eyes steady. Admiral Edam Becky did not smile. "Galactic Council," she said, voice calm and unamplified. "This is Admiral Becky of the Earth Fleet. We acknowledge your jurisdictional concern." SYT Charkal lifted his chin. "You approach under accusation. We approach under invitation," Becky replied. "Your summons to our envoy remains unanswered. We are here to ensure her safety." Lyra felt the room tilt, not physically, but socially. Safety. Not conquest. Not retaliation. Becky continued. "We have no hostile intent. Our weapons remain cold. Our formations are defensive. We request reciprocal transparency." "Reciprocal?" SYT Charkal echoed. "You inspect our ships?" Becky said. "We inspect yours. You review our logs. We review yours. Equal process." A murmur rolled through the terraces. Equal was not a word the Concord liked to hear. SYT Charkal's voice sharpened. "You presume parity." "No," Becky said. "I insist on it." Before SYT Charkal could respond, a Concord destroyer broke formation, sliding forward with unnecessary speed. Its targeting arrays flared to life, lighting the chamber with warning glyphs. Lyra's pulse spiked. "Admiral." "I see it," Becky said evenly. The destroyer's fire control signature locked on the nearest human ship. Then vanished. Not exploded. Not burned. Simply gone, systems dark, guidance blind, drifting inert. The chamber gasped as one. "What did they do?" a delegate hissed. The displays rewound, highlighting the moment, a lattice of faint points blooming around the destroyer, invisible until they weren't. Drones. Emitters. A mesh that wrapped without touching. Non-lethal. Surgical. SYT Charkal's voice cut through the noise. "An act of war." Becky's gaze did not flicker. "An act of defense. Your ship attempted a weapons lock. We removed the capacity to make a mistake." The disabled destroyer drifted, harmless, a quiet rebuke. Another alert chimed, civilian traffic rerouting. Human ships projected corridors of safe passage, guiding merchant vessels away from the tension. Medical channels opened, offers broadcast in half a dozen languages. "They're helping," someone said, incredulous. Lyra saw Threnvos lean forward, layered body tightening. "Watching. Learning." SYT Charkal's composure cracked at the edges. "You manipulate sentiment." Becky inclined her head slightly. "We prevent casualties." A smaller Concord patrol craft panicked, thrusters flaring erratically as its pilot lost orientation. It veered toward a cluster of civilian transports. Human response was immediate. Two ships shifted, their movement fluid, interposing without collision. Guidance beams nudged the patrol back into stability. A human voice spoke gently over open comms, translating in real time. "You're safe. Reduce thrust. Follow the blue vector." The patrol obeyed. The chamber fell silent again, but this time the silence was heavy with reassessment. SYT Charkal raised a hand. "Cease all maneuvers." Becky nodded. The fleet froze, perfect stillness against the stars. "You claim restraint," SYT Charkal said. "Yet you arrive in force." Becky's eyes held his. "Force does not require cruelty. Power does not require spectacle. We did not come to threaten your council." "Then why come at all?" SYT Charkal demanded. "Because your process endangered peace," Becky replied. "And because we do not allow our people to stand alone in hostile rooms." Lyra felt the words land through her ribs. Not pride. Relief. A legal aide whispered urgently to SYT Charkal. He waved them off, irritation flaring. "This display changes nothing. The deadline stands." Lyra stepped forward before the arbiter could regain rhythm. "It changes everything," she said. "You wanted a monster. You got witnesses. SYT Charcoal rounded on her. You orchestrated this theater. I orchestrated patience, Lyra replied. You orchestrated a lie. Gasps. Sharp clicks. A few delegates spoke at once, questions cutting through the air. SYT Charcoal lifted his voice. Order! The sound faltered. The room no longer belonged to him alone. Becky spoke again, softer now. High Arbiter, we will not fire the first shot. We will not violate civilian space. We will not escalate. But we will remain. Calmly. Lawfully. Until your inquiry is complete. Inquiry? SYT Charcoal snapped. Lyra met his gaze. You wanted procedure, she said. You're about to get it. For a moment, SYT Charcoal looked small, not physically, but strategically. A man who had prepared for submission and found himself facing refusal wrapped in discipline. Outside the spire, human ships held position like a held breath. Inside, the council began to understand that humanity had not arrived to beg, nor to burn. They had arrived to endure. And endurance, Lyra knew as she watched the Arbiter recalibrate, was often more dangerous than rage. The council chamber felt different after the fleet arrived. Not quieter, never that. But the air had changed, charged with the awareness that power could no longer be treated as a story only the Concord wrote. Outside the spire's vast windows, the Earth fleet held a disciplined arc, engines calm, weapons cold, formation steady enough to make the Concord's interception lines look like nervous scribbles. High Arbiter SYT Charcoal stood at his dais as if posture could restore inevitability. His officers whispered in tight clusters, hands moving over consoles, trying to find a lever that still worked. Lyra Vance stepped into the center platform again, where every lens could taste her heartbeat. High Arbiter, she said, I submit evidence to the record. SYT Charcoal's eyes narrowed. Your time for theatrics ended. This isn't theater, Lyra replied. This is chain of custody. The phrase landed like a legal stamp. Some delegates leaned forward without meaning to. Ambassador Harrow spoke next, voice smooth but weighted. The council demanded submission within 24 hours based on an accusation. We now formally contest the validity of the accusation, the evidence custody, and the integrity of the council's handling. SYT Charcoal's voice cut in. Your objections do not suspend enforcement. Lyra lifted her wrist and projected a packet, clean, numbered, cross-referenced. Under Precedent 12-7, contested custody triggers verification. Under Integrity Statute 9, tampering triggers mandatory inquiry. Those are your rules. A senior scribe raised a hand. State your submission. Lyra kept her tone surgical. Exhibit A, Corridor 17 beacon propagation mismatch. Timestamps exceed physical limits unless edited at restricted nodes. Exhibit B, custody log transfers between 3 Concord systems that cannot occur without enforcement authorization. Exhibit C, private contact from Council Auditor Relson offering reduced terms if Earth signs quietly. Relson stiffened where he stood behind a security detail, eyes darting. SYT Charcoal snapped. That is hearsay. It's a recording, Lyra said. She played it. Relson's voice filled the chamber, calm and poisonous. Outcomes shaped, falls softened, Earth turned into a lesson. The terrace delegates didn't need translation to understand the intent. A low rumble passed through the room, anger, fear, recognition. Relson tried to speak. This is... Harrow turned toward him with diplomat's gentleness sharpened to a blade. Was it said, Auditor? Relson's throat flexed. Context has been distorted. Context, Lyra said, doesn't change a bribe. SYT Charcoal's fingers tapped the armrest once, impatient, calculating. Even if an auditor acted improperly, it does not absolve Earth. Lyra nodded, as if agreeing. Correct. Which is why there's Exhibit D. The display shifted. Security corridor footage. A figure entering her quarters while she was in session. Clearance code stamped on screen. Enforcement block authorization. Timestamp aligned with the attempted plant of falsified orders. Someone tried to frame me, Lyra said. Not with a weapon. With paperwork. The terraces erupted into overlapping reactions. For the Concord, violence was crude. Evidence was elegant. And this was elegance turned rotten. A delegate shouted, translated imperfectly but clear enough. If they do it to humans, they can do it to us. HFY Charcoal raised his hand for silence. His voice stayed smooth, but a hairline fracture ran through it. Commander Vance claims tampering. The enforcement block denies. Enforcement action proceeds. He signaled to his tactical officers. On the main display, Concord ships began to shift again, slow, purposeful. Not firing, not yet, but moving into posture. The message was simple. Law is what the powerful say it is. Lyra's calm pulsed once. Becky, they're trying to bait us. Lyra answered without moving her lips. Hold. Do not fire. Harrow leaned close, words barely audible. If they move to blockade, Earth will be strangled without a shot. Lyra's gaze never left HFY Charcoal. Then we make blockade illegal. She looked up at the senior scribe. Integrity Statute 9, she said clearly. If evidence custody is compromised, enforcement is suspended pending inquiry. Automatic. No arbiter override. The scribe hesitated. The chamber waited like a held blade. HFY Charcoal's eyes flashed. The statute applies only if tampering is proven. Lyra lifted her chin. It is proven enough to trigger inquiry. That is how your system protects itself. Unless, she let the word hang. Your system is only a mask. That cut deeper than accusation. It implied collapse. A long pause followed, filled with the hum of the spire's life support, and the faint vibration of a million eyes watching across the galaxy. Then Threnvas stood. The folded cloth delegate rose from the terrace, layers unfolding with careful dignity. Their voice was thin but steady. High Arbiter, I invoke delegation safeguard. If precedent is ignored, any emergent species here becomes vulnerable to manufactured guilt. A second delegate, heavy-bodied, jeweled, shifted uncomfortably. This is internal enforcement matter, they protested. Threnvas didn't bend. Then open it. If you are clean, sunlight costs you nothing. A third voice joined, unexpected, an elder from a trade bloc, their species known for caution. I second the safeguard. Suspend enforcement pending inquiry. HFY Charcoal's face tightened. The room was slipping away, not because humans had threatened it, but because humans had given it a reason to remember its own fear. He tried to reclaim control. You would paralyze Council security because of one species tantrum? Harrow stepped forward, warm and lethal in the same breath. Not one species. Every species that has ever been told to comply for its own good. HFY Charcoal's gaze darted to the tactical display, to his officers, to the delegates rising one by one. He made his final move. Emergency authority, he announced, voice ringing. I authorize immediate stabilization action. Enforce submission. Disable human fleet. The chamber recoiled. Some delegates shouted objections. The senior scribe's hands lifted, uncertain whether to record or refuse. Outside, Concord ships attempted a broader lock. Inside, Becky's voice cut through an open channel, calm as deep water. We will not fire first. We will not escalate. We are recording all targeting attempts. Her fleet did not surge. It held. That restraint made HFY Charcoal's emergency decree look like what it was, panic dressed as righteousness. Lyra took one step forward. High Arbiter, she said, voice carrying into every broadcast. You just violated your own integrity statute by attempting enforcement during a pending inquiry trigger. You have created the exact condition you claim to prevent, instability. The senior scribe's voice rose, formal, trembling with the weight of precedent. Integrity Statute 9 acknowledged. Enforcement suspended pending inquiry. Emergency authority overridden by safeguard vote. Silence. HFY Charcoal froze. It wasn't defeat by force. It was defeat by structure, the kind that lasted. Harrow exhaled, and for a moment the diplomat looked like a tired man who had carried a planet on his shoulders. Earth does not seek vengeance, he said. We seek a treaty without chains. Lyra added softer. Shared corridors. Mutual inspection. No tribute. No monitors. Just agreements both sides can survive. Threnvas inclined their head. A new kind of seat, they said.